Today's episode is brought to you by CASSA, the Canadian Association of School System Administrators. If you've been listening to Education Matters, you know that one of my central themes is exploring Canadian identity through education and connecting the dots between leadership, policy, and meaningful change. And so this is exactly what CASSA does. They bring together superintendents and system leaders from coast to coast to coast across Canada to tackle the biggest challenges in public education, with a sharp focus on equity, student success, and collaboration. Learn more at CASSA, that's CASSA-acgcs.ca.
What's inspiring as an educator is that we should be champions of possibility. We need to model a love for learning and create environments where any student can feel seen, can feel heard, can feel capable of reaching greatness at each of their unique levels, where every student believes that they're capable of anything they put their mind to.
In a country without a national education ministry, unity in Canadian schooling doesn't come from the top. It's built through relationships, dialogue, and shared commitments. And for years, the CASSA conference has been one of the most meaningful places where that happens. It's where I first began talking seriously about education as a pillar of Canada's evolving national identity. And on today's podcast, I explore this idea further with two guests, Dean Shareski and Anna Villalta. Dean is well known to many of you as a speaker, writer, and advocate for joy and human-centered learning. He spent his career helping school systems think critically and creatively about technology, pedagogy, and leadership. Anna is an associate superintendent in the English Montreal School Board, and she brings a uniquely Quebecois perspective to the national conversation. One that reminds us how complex our regional differences really are, and yet how central they are to our national identity. In this episode, we explore the role of artificial intelligence in Canadian schools, not just as a tool, but as a force that's challenging how we think about teaching, learning, and humanity itself. Dean and Anna bring complementary perspectives to this podcast: curiosity and caution, innovation, and empathy. We talk about AI literacy, equity of access, the risks of efficiency-driven thinking. We also explore how these national conversations across language, culture, and provinces shape who we are and who we want to become as a nation. If you care about public education in Canada, about education leadership, and the future we can build together through education, this is a conversation for you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dean Shareski and Anna Villalta. Anna Villalta, Dean Shareski, welcome to the Education Matters podcast. Anna, where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in Montreal, Quebec. In the wonderful province of Francophonie.
Wonderful. And Mr. Shareski, welcome back. Where does this find you today?
A home office in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And I'm going to say this just because then the people are focusing on the horse behind me. You had to bring that up, like it's there and people are looking at that. And so anyways, this is the home office filled with my wife's decor. I just work here. That's all I do. She's the boss. I just work here.
For those that are just listening into the podcast version, the audio version of this, Dean has a beautifully painted horse behind him, and Anna has given him a bit of a complex because the horse's butt kind of lines up with his right ear. But it looks wonderful, and shout out to Paula for the beautiful painting. So with that, a bit of a different start than we're used to here. But I would have given us all a kind of introduction as to the reason we're here together, and that reason being really a CASSA conference happening in just over a week's time in St. John's, Newfoundland. And Anna's a longtime board member of CASSA, and Dean, you are keynoting this year. Dean, you and I have been big supporters of CASSA in the past. I actually believe it's one of our first ever joint presentations that we gave together to a group of members about our view of, for lack of a better term, the identity of the education identity that we've seen throughout our travels over the years. So Dean, maybe we start with you and give us a little glimpse into what the keynote's going to be this year.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and good to see you again, Anna, and looking forward to seeing you in the real
Absolutely.
in St. John's. You're right, Jason, in that CASSA has always kind of been, I'd say, an underrated conference for a couple of reasons. Number one, just because that's just not the way Canadians think about education. We're very obvious, everything is very, obviously provincially presided upon and thought about, and so there's these few and far between opportunities for cross provincial people to get together and learn with and from each other. And then the second part of it is, it's in this sort of interesting time where it's just into July, and a lot of school system leaders kind of continue that first couple weeks in July, but a lot of them it's like, all right, like I've had enough, I need a break. So it sometimes is a challenging time of year. But what I can say from the first CASSA that I attended, I believe in 2012, it's always proven to just really be a fascinating time together, just to see everyone from across the country. And your comment about us doing that presentation on what is the Canadian identity? I mean, that's a conversation that you and I have constantly. That has been a thread of our professional lives for the better part of a decade. Trying to understand this and appreciate it and love it, and yet it's not something I think we've fully captured. And so my keynote, and I full disclosure. So when I had to sort of submit the actual title, so Anna and I had been talking about this, I think, since the fall maybe, and said, hey, maybe this will work out. And anyways, all right. So they decided, we'll take a chance. Not really taking a chance on this guy, because in 2013 I keynoted in St. John's at the same conference.
Okay, no.
So it'll be 12 years later, which I'm sure I know of a couple people that I know will be there that were there in 2012. Tom D'Amico being one, who's also another keynote. But anyway, the time it was like submitting a title, it was right during the Four Nations Cup. It was right when Trudeau resigned. Sort of all the things were happening, and that phrase "elbows up" kind of became known. And so I just, in the most cheesy but maybe Canadian way, I thought, I'm going to talk about that kind of idea, right? And what does that look like? And sort of all of the sort of references to hockey and just Canadiana as we know it, and then what does that look like in an education system? And so my effort or goal is to try to sort of help understand how that Canadiana mentality looks like in education, specifically as we're looking at AI, right? Like, what does that look like as we sort of try to wrap our heads around this? It's something that we're all together trying to understand and figure out. It's really an exciting time, I think, from that perspective. And once again, my experience has been this is better when we do this together. And so the opportunities that I've had in my current role to be able to do this in cohort models across the country, but just even having this conversation as with a broader community and bringing in those diverse perspectives. And I think too, really sitting with I guess the complexity of it, right? Like that, like we don't all think about it the same. And so we don't have to. We don't all have to come at this with exactly the same lens. And that's not bothering people, right? Like it's not like, oh no, we have to get to some very narrow consensus of how AI is going to impact us. I mean, we all, I think, collectively agree it's here. We don't have any choice around that. And we can hate it. That's fine. You get to do that. You can love it. You can do that too. But there's lots of nuance and challenges within that spectrum that we're all trying to figure out. And I guess I've had the privilege of being able to see that. So that's I mean, a long-winded description of what I want to talk about.
Yeah, let me jump in for a quick sec, because I think this is a good place to start. Dean, can you briefly describe the work you've been doing across the country? And Anna, I know you've been also part of that work. So let's let Dean give the overview, and then Anna, if you can, give your experience in how, as part of the cohorts that Dean mentioned, you're learning about AI from a systems level.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of varied. Like some of the work has been, district at a district level, and that's had lots of success. And I know that Tom D'Amico, who will be keynoting on Saturday, I'm Friday and he's Saturday. He'll talk about that experience and the great work that he's been able to lead. But I mean, even without my involvement with Ottawa Catholic, Tom has always graciously shared. People want to know, like, how did you figure this out? So he's very much interested and living out what that means to be a good um, I guess a good citizen and a good colleague in that space. So no lack of desire to share. But I would argue that the greatest success that I've had in this work has been in largely in the Metro Vancouver area and then across Ontario in these larger cohorts where you come together in a room with multiple boards and districts, different sizes, different parts on their journey. And sometimes in those scenarios, if you look at another another topic, if you will, whether it's something like assessment or anything else like that, there's not always as much interest in that because people get very I guess tied to what they're doing specifically, and the there's a bit more of a narrowness to their thinking, whereas this one's like, what I love about it, and again I've always loved about any kind of gathering that involves a diverse group, is the willingness to learn with and from people who may be farther ahead or farther behind. Like Tom is such an advocate of this, and he might say, like, what does Ottawa Catholic have to learn from some small district in Ontario that's just getting started in their journey? But the truth is, there is to learn because people bring a different lens. And I'll give you a very specific example. Is there's a district in Ontario whose first foray into AI is report card comments, right? Principals seeing teachers using AI report card comments and going like, what is this? What do we do with this? Do we say this is bad? Do we say this is good? And it's like, all right, let's start with there. So they've been able to work towards some kind of a guidelines for teachers to say, we get it, AI's there, it's a useful tool for you, but here's how we kind of want you to think about it from a collective and organizational perspective. So I love that idea of like learn with and from each other. So I think that cohort model to me is really what I believe is the best.
So you've been facilitating that, everything from an intro to AI for a lot of folks, what it is, and what Gen AI is and isn't. And then you have this cohort model where there's lots of sharing. Anna, from your perspective, can you talk about what that's looked like?
Well, I think that, like Dean said, across the country, you'll have different people will be at different points in this journey, and so many are very skeptical, and some are very open and willing to learn and willing to move forward with it. And I think that the beauty of having someone like Dean to present at CASSA, where we bring together all of the different leaders from across Canada, is it's a time for us to reflect, but it's also a time for us to listen to the others and see, and soothe our worries and our concerns, because many are really concerned. And like Dean said, he gave you one example, but I can give you many examples of, students who have used AI to prepare for exams and have memorized responses and written them out. And we know that it's AI. We know it's not the student's work. Whereas in the past, a student would have just, written out his text or whatever, or learned it, and it would have come from him or from her. So really, this opportunity really gives us a chance to be innovative, to be open to new ideas, even connecting just from across the country and looking peeking into other provinces to see, like, how are you doing it? How are you bringing this? And why aren't you afraid of the things that we're really skeptical about? And
Let's
maybe
just say that. No, 100%, Anna. And I think the other part that's maybe unique about this particular work is that and then there still are some people who are waiting for ministries of education to, like, you guys start here. And honestly, that's just not happening in almost every province other than British Columbia and New Brunswick. We don't have any province who really kind of step forward because it's a hot button issue. Like there's like, what if we say something wrong? Like that controversy that lives within this is making people very risk averse. And in addition, like there's no shortage of things for people to be doing right now. It's not like, oh, gee whiz, I was hoping for something to come my way to have to address. I mean, you read the headlines of budget challenges and, everything else that's in there. Like, there's so many issues that this is not like, how do you make time and space? Nobody necessarily owns it. And so that's the other thing that we've sort of pushed against is do not give this to your IT people to say it's an IT thing. Like that's a mistake. I would say don't make that mistake. It's not anybody's thing. It's everybody's thing. And so that requires another level of leadership to be able to lead in that way that says, and it's an opportunity, but also a challenge. So there's a lot of pieces to this that say we need to come together and learn from each other because not one board has got this figured out.
Okay, Dean. So with that context, you mentioned Tom D'Amico, and Tom has certainly been part of this podcast before, so the audience will be familiar with the work that Ottawa Catholic is doing. But are there other districts that you would say are leading the work across Canada, and what does that look like?
I mean, yes. So I often would point to West Vancouver, Chris Kennedy, Mark Permain in Surrey. So the BC work is they're a little bit farther ahead in terms of the things they have done. So in terms of like some publicly facing stuff, there's some really nice resources that have been shared for parents. Waterloo Catholic also really, really strong. They've got a strong team of women there who are just doing amazing work in terms of, creating some resources for people. And in the end, at this point too, there's so much out there. It's a matter of, sort of curation. And I think more, I would argue, the way in which it's being spoken about and implemented in schools. But what I would say in terms of like these little examples, these use cases, if you will, are all over, and I mean they're happening in school boards where people might not be talking about AI collectively, but nobody knows it, right? Because everybody's, not shouldn't say everybody, but I mean many people and students are using this and probably finding interesting ways. But what I would say is that in many of the cases, they're afraid to tell people about how they're using it because it hasn't been kind of acknowledged from a systems level that yes, it's here and we are advocating people to use it in safe and ethical ways because they haven't outlined what those safe and ethical ways might be. So there's that kind of innovation is happening under the table. And so I guess what I would say too is that our approach has been not to, like, it's not a race. Like, you don't need to rush into this, but be on it all, like have a plan to keep this conversation going and active in as many places as you can. And also really a stronger emphasis on AI literacy. In other words, AI, learning about AI rather than learning with AI. Not that those things aren't happening simultaneously. Sure, we know that teachers, students are using it. And this is not a saying, well, you have to wait until you build that literacy. But the problem is there are too many people in the organizations, and this is everywhere from business operations to students to teachers, who still aren't very literate when it comes to AI. And so it's very difficult to have conversations about those ethics when you don't really understand what it is and how it works and have some perspectives on it. So I would say that right now, figuring out the plan to engage your entire organization in an AI literacy plan is a priority, I would say. And again, it's not always that way, but that's where I think that I would argue the really innovative, like, how do you get there, right? That's not an easy thing to do when you're trying to communicate and teach across your entire system. And again, I know Anna's done so much work in terms of professional learning, but her professional learning is generally targeted toward teachers and principals. Now we're including a whole other set of people for whom this kind of professional learning is kind of new to them, and that's a challenge for many boards.
So, and I guess this question is for both of you, really. But Dean, I'll let you start. What kind of shifts in pedagogy do you want to see, or if I can ask another way, what kind of opportunities exist now that AI is kind of throwing a monkey wrench into the current system?
Well, I mean, there's probably a lot of nuanced pieces, but I would say the biggest sort of opportunity and challenge that exists at the same time is the degree to which AI should be used for sort of that thought partner tutoring, personalized learning piece, right? So the way that you and I would use AI in terms of helping us sort of navigate some ideas and kind of push us along feels like, when it's done right, is that you have a little assistant at your side that's helping you through things and giving you different perspectives and moving forward, right? So there's,
and
broadly speaking,
brainstorm.
Yeah, like a really good kind of use that way. And when the challenge of that is when should that be used in a with students and kids, and not in lieu of a teacher, not to replace a teacher, but to augment what a teacher does. But even within that general concept of, wow, that would be awesome if every kid had a tutor at their side. Well, it would be. However, how do we ensure that tutor isn't, like a doting parent who takes the science project and says, we've had too many arguments. You go watch TV. I'll finish your solar system project, and you'll bring it to school tomorrow, and you'll get a high praise for completing a project that you didn't even do. That's in essence where the struggle of this is, and when and how do we do that? So that's one of the really, I guess, challenging pieces where we're at right now in terms of like that. There's some possibilities there, but man, there's some real risks that I'm very, very concerned about and want to help people work through.
But I think that in terms of education, we really need to change the mindset, because it's changing the way that we think about what AI can do for us, and how we're going to use it in teaching and increasing our students' critical thinking skills. It's going to dramatically change teachers are going to have to do that. They're going to have to change the way that they ask students to do research. They're going to have to help them build it into their teaching and encourage them to use different skills. And a different skill set is going to be needed so that they can demonstrate what their learning is, and their learning is going to take off, because AI is going to be giving them the opportunity to brainstorm with them, like as if you had a friend beside you that was saying, oh, what about this, and what about this idea, what about that idea, and they just take off with all these ideas. And it'll be so instrumental for teachers to take that and run with it, and be able to encourage students to be innovative, to be creative, to be more imaginative. They'll be able to be so, it'll be so transformative in terms of education, and being able to teach students even design thinking, so that they can be critical thinkers and have the skills that they need for tomorrow. Because whether we like it or not, the world is moving ahead. And AI is going to take over a lot of jobs, and we need to prepare our students so that they're ready for that, and ready to fit into a world where it's their skill set is going to have to be more than what AI can do. And if that means bringing the emotional touch, bringing those critical thinking skills that AI can't bring about, well, then that's what we have to teach them. We need to prepare them.
As you share that, Anna, then my sort of annoying characteristic of that my wife says, you're such a contrarian. I sit on this fence, right? And I sit firmly on the fence, and I'm looking at the side that you described where there's opportunities and changes that need to be addressed. And then I'm looking on the other side, and I'm hearing the voices of all of the challenges to, the still, even in that context, right? Like there are inherent dangers and risks involved in that. And again, that's where I go, like, I love you raising those conversations, because I want to be in a room with people who will go and head to head. And again, this is where the hockey analogy always shines, right? Is that, you watch the playoffs now where teams battle it out. They're enemies. They're trying to figure it out. And in the end, they shake hands, and there's this really cordial kind of like, yeah, that was a great battle. And I want that same kind of mentality to happen within our schools, where your idea and vision is shared, and people say, push back on you, and you push back on them, and we end up in a better place, because we've acknowledged, because we need people who are seeing the potential and the possibility of this. And as you say, talk about jobs, and it's different, and every technology, we lose something. That's just a guarantee. That's a fact. Like when you introduce a new technology, you will lose something. All right, what is it we lost, and how do we ensure that we're not losing the worst or the best of our humanity in that loss? Very, very difficult. And Jason loves that kind of McLuhan-ish conversations. But like that's where I'm at. Is like, yep, but, and I want and I want to kind of not to be contrarian just for the sake of it, but to really drill down to like a thoughtful approach to AI that takes the best of it and tries to push aside the worst of it.
And that's the beauty of bringing together people who are at different points in this journey of implementing it, because then those who have a more open mindset can be challenged and can, be questioned about those safety concerns or whatever concerns that a school board or a school district might have with the implementation of it. And at the same time, also, looking at, like I said, peering into other boards, looking at how they did it. How did they face those challenges? I'm certain that in these boards, they started off somewhere, and they needed to address all of these things. And the teachers and staff all had the same concerns that are being brought up, but at a different time and in a different space. So, and again, our government too is, I know that in Quebec, our government is a little bit more, it's less of a risk taker, shall I say. And so I think it would benefit our government as well to see how they're doing it elsewhere. And that's why nationwide gatherings like the ones at CASSA are important for system transformation, so that we could create opportunities for learning and for reflecting deeply and being inspired on how to look at things more practically and bring them to our students and of course transform our schools to better places.
And I'm just gonna say the beautiful part about that is that when you say that, Anna, I know enough about you to know that you are coming at this from, a similar place. We want the best for kids. That is our common theme. Like that's the thing that brings us together. We all want that. We don't have these ulterior motives for any other thing. And so I think we can engage in these sort of challenging conversations, knowing that in the end, that's what we want. Like we're trying to figure out what the best thing is for our kids, and we care about children, and enough to say, I want to understand this. And even if we disagree, I know in the end we want the same thing. How we get there, that's the richness of the conversation, and something we should embrace rather than try to avoid too.
Well, I think that, in as system leaders, we're always on balancing things. And of course we have passion. We want to be innovative. We want to bring new ways of learning and teaching to our boards. But then we also know that that there's always a backlash. There are always people who are going to be critical, and we need to be ready for that. We need to be able to have, to explain that we've tread very slowly and patiently, and we've looked at every concern that possibly could arise, and we need to be ready for all of those parents who might have serious concerns, and they're really real concerns, and we need to be. And so sometimes we have different leaders, some who are more courageous and some who might tread a little more carefully. And so that's the reason for having opportunities to see how others are doing it, and then feeling a little more confident to jump in and jump into the cold water and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together, and having encouragement, because we need to have people around us cheering for us and saying, we can do this together. And that's important.
So one more question, Dean and Anna, for both of you on AI. And then I really want to spend some time discussing with Anna her perspective of education, especially because you're the first guest on the podcast from Quebec. And I've always been very fascinated as to the work that's happening there. So before we get there, though, to both of you, what future do you want to see, given the realities that AI is bringing to the table now?
Well, I mean, for me, it is how can AI bring out the best of humanity? And that is a really, really difficult question. I think about Ottawa Catholic, who in some of their goals, they talk about AI to reduce screen time, which, I mean, people go like, what? And they said,
sounds counterintuitive.
It does. And he said, like, I get it. Like, that is going to be a challenging goal. But I mean, we feel like if indeed AI is this major time saver that we talk about it being, all right, well, if that's true, then how do we spend less time on our devices and more time with each other? I also think, it's interesting when I think about the evolution of technology in schools. And, when I first was even working here at our local school board in the mid 2000s, looking at one-to-one as being, okay, that's what we got to get to. We got to get devices. And I think there's still a desire to make sure that there's access and equity for kids in terms of devices. But it seems like in many cases, kids have devices now for the most part. Sure, certainly there's some students that don't have, and we want to think about those, but we have a large majority of our students who have access, and they have access 24 hours a day. So how do we then, in that finite time that they're in a building together, take advantage of the human experience, right? Like, so that classrooms might be more interactive, more social than they've ever been before. And AI, once again, I think we're in a moment in time right now where, as we're trying to learn about AI, that AI literacy, there's more conversation about it and it's talked about. But future-wise, I would love to see AI being, we don't talk about it anymore, but when we're in a school, in an education setting, we're so fascinated with the opportunity we have to sit next to somebody else, another human being, and that we value that. And that teachers themselves elevate their humanity in the classroom. I've been a long advocate for bring your whole self to it. Like one of my quotes I often use in my presentations is the best thing you can do for your students is to be an interesting person, right? Like that weird hobby you have, or book you read, or movie you went to, or concert you listen to, like that is like that's why I don't want an AI teacher. I want somebody who's a flawed human being, sure, and that whole idea of sort of embracing the just the imperfections of humanity, right? Like I think I could go on a long talk to you about the mental health elements of AI and how, while there are certainly positive aspects, one of the things that people talk about, well, AI is always there. It's perfect. And it does all those things. And it's like, yeah, I get that. And that's good. But at the same time, navigating the human experience is dealing with people who sometimes don't pick up the phone when you call them, who give you bad advice. And that you got to figure that out, right? Like you don't say, well, I wish this person was better, perfect. Like all three of us are married and been married for a while, and we know enough to know that our spouses, I know I'm not far from all the things my wife has to navigate with me, but like that's the beauty of those relationships is like, yeah, we got to figure this out, and you go through the challenges, and you kind of. So I guess that's all I'm trying to say is that my goal for AI is to elevate humanity in the richness that we've all experienced at times, but to keep that as being like, that's the beauty of this.
Accelerate that. That's a great answer.
So, I mean, we know that we need to teach students how to use technology and how to think critically, and this is something we've been thinking about a lot now and looking at the positives. But Dean is right. We do see the social impact of this AI and the ethics that's connected to it. And so what I'm hoping for the future is that classrooms would be places that would prepare students to shape the future, not just survive AI, but that they would be equipped with using and that technology would be deeply personalized, that the tech would be to support those individual learning journeys. Because I think we need to look very much more closely at that. We have, AI powered tools and technology like VR to personalize instruction and bring those abstract concepts that students really have difficulty with, to bring them to life so that every student has access to learning. Every student, despite their difficulties or their disabilities, they could use tech not just to consume it, but to create and to question and to, produce podcasts even like today, or explore global issues, and classrooms would be spaces where students could where they could bring their passions to the classroom, and then create, and technology would enhance that. It would also free up time for teachers so that they could have deeper conversations with students, be able to mentor them, and provide social emotional learning spaces where students can be happy, can feel like they belong. So it'll kind of take away from the mechanical work like the corrections and all the rest of it, but it also brings students and prepare them to thrive in a world that's very interconnected, globally connected. I think that it's going to bring so many different possibilities to the classroom, as long as we have the technology, because that's the other issue. I mean, I'm talking about the tech tools and having those in our classrooms.
Yeah.
With all the cutbacks that I know that in Quebec we're facing, with tons of cutbacks, that is going to be very difficult for us to fulfill. But that's my hope.
Well, that's actually a pretty good segue, Anna, to talking a little bit more about CASSA, your role in CASSA in Quebec. But I just want to put a fine point on a couple of things that you both mentioned there. One, I think that all the folks on the cutting edge here in Canada, when looking at AI and education, are looking to double down on the things that we do really well. Equity, provide equity of access, equity of opportunity for learning, say, about AI, but also within the classrooms to support the diversity of our student body and to enhance things that we are doing ahead of other countries, whether it's competency-based education, inquiry-based, and then obviously project-based. So to me, if I can encapsulate it like that, your comments like that, I think we are well poised to have this conversation and to really take advantage of it more so than maybe other countries. So with that, Anna, I would like to ask you about your, let's start maybe with your involvement in CASSA. You've been a board member for how long?
So I've been a board member since 2022. And I I mean, I sit on CASSA as a representative from our provincial association, where I sit on the executive. I'm
Mm-hmm.
the vice president of the AAESQ,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Administrators Association of English Schools of Quebec. And so I sit on CASSA, and I contribute to their initiatives and to also specifically to their professional learning. Since I joined the organization, I sit on the professional learning committee, where I help to design and shall I say, organize and deliver CASSA's
Mm-hmm.
Summer Leadership Conference. And I've done that the past 3 years. And the annual event is getting. I think that as the years go on, we've gained so much experience throughout that we've really. I think this year is going to be one of the greater conferences. We have lots of people coming out to Newfoundland, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. Some of the other ways that I've contributed to CASSA is through their magazine, their national magazine called Leaders and Learners, where I've written about reflective leadership and professional identity
Mm.
and evolving roles of system leaders. And they were just some articles were a way just to share insights and maybe spark some dialogue among my peers and bring out the passion that I have for education. In addition to that, I've also had the privilege of representing CASSA as the Eastern Canadian representative on the board of governors at the AASA, which is the American Association of
Mm-hmm.
School Administrators. And it's allowed me to engage in conversations, cross-border conversations, should I say, about educational leadership. And that experience really helped to bridge my understanding and my perspectives on Canadian and American system level challenges and innovations. And it's reinforced the importance of even an international collaboration, because in the States they have much more research and they have a lot to help us and to see things differently, more innovative approaches that come from their research in their universities in the U.S.
Yeah, I really truly believe in this kind of pet theory I have, that there's other work out there on it, of course, that education is really one of the areas where not only we can share internally across provinces and learn from each other, but that's
Mhm.
obvious, but even internationally, like there's no reason to compete there with China, say, like we would on technological development, right? There is it gets a little murkier, but when it comes to especially K-12 learning, there's so many opportunities to share. So, can you describe for the audience um, what's education like in Quebec, and why is it important for Quebec to have a voice, at the table when at an organization like CASA?
What's Quebec education like in Quebec? Well, um, Quebec is very unique. Although we have very similar challenges in our school system across Canada, um, we are a little bit different because we have phased out a lot of the secular education, shall I say, and we in Quebec, the focus or the importance is placed on cultural influences and very much on uh, the language of instruction being
Hmm.
French primarily. Although we have English language schools, and we have actually 9 English language school boards, and they exist for students who are eligible to go into those schools, the curriculum does emphasize Francophone culture and history. And in other provinces, English is the dominant language of instruction. with French immersion or maybe Francophone schools that are available. But it's I'd say the curriculum is more Anglophone
Hmm.
centric, maybe. And but we have a complex system in our province. The French sector are called des centres de services scolaires, whereas the English sector is, and we've fought really hard as the English sector to retain our democratically elected school boards, where we still have control over the management of our boards. And that dual structure, combined with our commitment to bilingualism in our English school boards and that cultural diversity within a province that really prides itself of its French Quebec culture, makes the system really complex and, like I said before, really unique. So yeah, we that makes it unique. There are a few other things that are different from the other provinces, like the structure of our secondary and post-secondary education, as well as like the fact that we've brought in a culture and citizenship program and really phased out any religious education. So that is really different from across the country. But otherwise, I mean, we. I think that we have many of the same challenges, and we have we try really hard to make the best of living in this very challenging structure that we have to educate our students in. I think we
Well,
do a great job.
I think you do too, and I mean I think the credit goes even further than that. In that, the whole idea of Canadian multiculturalism, I think, really starts with the history of the Francophone peoples. Like, I mean, it's made our national identity one of negotiation, if I can put it that way, of collaboration, right? I mean, one of the only modern countries, if not the only, to form without a civil war, which is in itself quite remarkable. And I think part of this notion of Canada as an ongoing project has always been there from the onset because of the clash between the Anglo and the Francophone. So I've always found it very amazing or really interesting the roots of those stories and how that gets played out in education. If I can
But
ask
I
you,
would also say that history, that culture speaks to that idea I said before, is that we are acknowledging sort of the diversity, and that those bring some tensions in some cases, and we have to navigate those. And for the most part, we've done a pretty good job. Like you mentioned, the tensions that exist in Quebec, and the fact that they've sort of removed the religious nature of that. Well, I look at the province. I live in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and then Ontario. And having spent a lot of time in Ontario, one of the great joys of this cohort network is bringing together Catholic and public and French boards together in a room. That doesn't always happen, but the degree to which people can sort of at times put aside those differences, at times address the differences. That's fascinating. It's hard work. Like, it's way better. That's why the U.S. Without going too far down a rabbit hole of they work so hard to make everybody the same. Like, we want everybody to be the same, and you all have to sort of think the same and be the same. And it's like, nah, that's and whereas we're more like, we like it that we don't think the same. It's hard work. It's not easy. It would be if we're just looking for efficiency. And again, this probably lots of ties to AI, right? If we're just looking for efficiencies, there are efficiencies to have, but that's not always the best.
Well, that's part of the
best route
struggle.
forward.
I think that's part of the struggle in Quebec, though, because across Canada, we accept all those differences. But in the name of efficiency, I think that our ministry does want us to be equal and the same. And what they don't understand is that our Anglophone community has our own cultural influences, that it makes it very difficult for us to then become equal to them when we're not, and we have so many differences. And that's perhaps sometimes, it's viewed differently. Some see it as a denial that we have our own identity and that we bring our own identity to Quebec. And sometimes it's the perspective is that they need to force the francophone identity onto us so that, we don't diminish their identity. So it does create challenges in Quebec. But I do want to say that, amongst the entire province and amongst English school boards and French centre de service, we collaborate really well. And I think that we respect each other's identity and respect it much better, I would say, than perhaps the political entity would.
Yeah, I mean, it just even begs the questions around what does identity mean? And can identity be fixed? Is it always fluid? And to me, that is the great project of Canada. And then we have certainly a lot of challenges now with the way the world is the way history is unfolding right now. But I think that question about what it means to be Canadian, and then if in our context, what does it mean to be educated as a Canadian? What's our identity? And if I can pull some things together, I see it, obviously the care that we all give to diversity. I'm sure it's the same in Quebec too. Although you have I would say more stringent guidelines as to how schools operate within that religious context. Which, to be quite frank, I don't mind one bit. I actually I like a lot of the thinking behind it, maybe not all of it, but that idea that we allow others to be who they are and provide support. Like, I know that's actually the case. I mean, our national child care that was passed in the last Liberal government it originated from Quebec, right? Like, to me, that floor that we provide all citizens is much higher than many other places from around the world. And I know that's the case in education. So I'd say that's one of the key things. Our movement towards competency-based education. Is there a movement like that in Quebec as well? I know provincially sometimes it's a bit slow to move, but practically in the way boards are working, is that the case as well?
Yes, in Quebec, we've had competency-based pedagogy since many years. So it's not a novelty to us. It's just that we do run into some challenges because our report card doesn't reflect the competency-based criteria. So that's what it makes it difficult for us to move that philosophy forward. It really, really is a sticking point because our evaluation is so different, and with standardized exams and all the rest of it, it really mixes everything up.
And I would just add to that shift is pretty true across the country, and even in places where the actual reporting system has improved to be more aligned, there still is a cultural tension that exists between whether it's parents or teachers who are still holding to previous
or universities and colleges.
Well,
and
sure, and trying to align with
acceptance.
that. And again, I think this is where AI is pushing this even more, because for those teachers who said, well, the essay is the thing, it's like, we were never there to like the essay was the learning. That's not the learning. The learning is all the things that went inside your head to get that thing out. Now that's the challenge of, well, how do I assess what was going on in your head?
Yeah.
And previously it was all through, there was the evidence, right? That paper was the evidence. It's like, that's not going to get you probably the evidence that you need to be able to understand if these competencies have indeed been met and or exceeded. Exactly. So that, again, AI is pushing us to challenge us to those questions.
So, Anna, if I can ask you, we've talked about the challenges and some of the things that make Quebec education unique, but if I can ask you, what are some of the most inspiring things you've seen over the years?
So I have to say that that if I think about the most inspiring initiative that I've been involved with, was during a STEAM project that we ran with our board and 7 schools that across our school board, and the MUHC, which is the Montreal Research Institute, and researchers that worked there. The researchers reached out to our board, and they wanted to collaborate on a project where they could give back to the community. And and I think the beauty of that project for me and what made it so inspiring was that we didn't exclude any school that wanted to join this project. And that meant that schools from marginalized communities, schools with students that had disabilities, they were given the green light and they participated and they worked with researchers on, they designed projects. They came up with inquiry based, it was all inquiry based. They came up with topics that they were passionate about, and then worked on research projects together with these researchers from the institute.
Hmm.
And what impacted me most, I think, firstly, was the openness of the Research Institute with students from
Hmm.
schools that had students with disabilities. Watching those students work alongside researchers and what they accomplished was extraordinary, beyond what you could even imagine. I mean, the students had walked in on the first day and they saw students from other schools, like from more of our prestigious schools where students have to write, entrance
Mhm.
exams to get into. And I remember some of those students sitting back and said, oh my God, this is not a place for me. And told their teachers, like, we can't be here. Like there's no comparison between those kids and us. But the researchers welcomed them, and like I said before, they accomplished beyond what anyone could imagine. It reminded me that, and the teachers and the students as well, that when we shed that deficit mindset and we
Hmm.
embrace that growth mindset that we were talking about before with regards to AI, every student can thrive despite their challenges, despite their weaknesses. And I think that for me, what's inspiring as an educator is that we should be champions of possibility. We need to model a love for learning, and create environments where any student can feel seen, can feel heard, can feel capable of reaching greatness at each of their unique levels, where every student believes that they're capable of anything they put their mind to. And that for me is the most inspiring thing. And I want to see more of that. And that's something that I hope for all the time in our best classrooms.
That's such a great example, and I absolutely love the examples when there's these really intricate collaborations outside the school system, because that way we remove this idea of the school system as an island that just operates, keeping kids busy while parents
Right.
work, right? And they actually are part of something bigger.
And
So, if,
they really contributed to our students in many ways. So we always think that we create these partnerships with universities or with
Mhm.
health centers, and we think that, oh, we're going to send all of our best students here so that they
Right.
can all aspire to become doctors and what have you. But you know what, I mean, we had students that actually participated in the project from some of our best schools and came out from there. And when you asked them what they learned, they said they learned that they didn't want to go into research or into a hospital
Interesting.
setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, those experiences
Mhm.
are will benefit students in many ways, even ways that you wouldn't expect.
So, Anna, my
Mhm.
penultimate question for you is, if you had a magic wand, how could we make this kind of education ubiquitous? Let's just say across Quebec. We'll leave Canada for another day.
You sure you want to leave me in Quebec?
Well, you can
Um,
answer it anyway. You have a magic wand, so you
yeah.
can go and do anything you want. What would you do?
Well, I mean, I think to begin with, and in the very difficult predicament that we sit in Quebec right now, I don't know if you've heard that our government is imposing $500 million of cuts in Quebec in education. And actually, it's closer to $1 billion
That's
because
crazy.
with
That's
all of the
crazy.
devastating cuts that they're doing at the ministry level, with very little consultation, shall I say. But if I had a magic wand, I think that I would ensure, to begin with, that very stable funding for public education
Amen.
to create classrooms
Yeah.
that are inclusive, that are staffed, that are supported with inspired educators, with learners, with students that are engaged, where students are future ready, like we said before, and just rooted in well-being, and just being a place where we prepare students to thrive in a complex world, because it's definitely complex.
Wonderful.
But I think that above all, we need money, and we need
Well,
money to be able to do all of this.
well, it's devastating to hear there's actual cuts, because what's been happening, I know across the country, it's not even like so much cuts, which is starting to happen now, of course, is just underfunding. But it's like it's been underfunded for decades and decades, right? Like when we understand how how poorly EAs are paid, and then you understand how crucial they are, how there are significant lacks of mental health support for teachers, for students. We can have a whole nother podcast in this, but
Yeah.
I always
And
appreciate when people like you in your position are drawing attention to this.
I think that worse than that is that the government doesn't realize the astronomical effects that it's going to have on our students. And
And then our workforce, and then our businesses, and then
yeah,
our tax revenue. It's like they are so myopic in their
yeah,
vision of how you support education and the
yeah.
impacts of properly supporting education. But Anna, why don't we shelf this for another day, because it's something
Mhm.
obviously we're both
Yeah,
passionate about.
yeah.
Let's end where we began. Let's start with you here, Dean. What are you most looking forward to at CASSA?
Oh, just hanging out with cool people. I mean, there's just so many people that I know and love and think they're doing amazing work, and so getting a chance just to sit and visit with people. And they also too, like when it comes to, and I have a very documented process of developing a keynote where I'm 2 or 3 months out very stressed about it, and then when I start working on it, I think, well, this is going to suck, this is going to be terrible. Then I get to the point where it's like, I might have a
It
chance
might
here, this
work.
might
It
be
might work.
good. And then as I get closer, I get more and more excited. I'm in right now the phase of like I'm just getting over this might suck, but it's also now I know all the things I have to do, and it's like, okay, I there's still so much to do, right? So anyway, that aside, it is really just about being able to sort of engage with people. And again, Jason, you and I always talk about the great privilege that we've had over our careers to be able to do this much more than the people who are actually at the event. For them, it's like a rare opportunity. I get to see people across Canada all the time, but to see them in a room together, interacting and talking about the challenges that they face, and again, I love hearing from Anna, like the specific nuances of the Quebec experience, like, and how we're trying to figure out this thing, and this is occupying time and space in my mind as the thing to overcome. And then you hear somebody from Alberta talk about something slightly different and what challenges they are, and sometimes it ends up there's a little bit of a just grateful to have your own mess, because I understand my mess. I don't want their mess, but I know my mess, and I can kind of work within that one, but also just appreciating that the messes are a little different,
Well,
but yeah.
in my interview with Reg, he said something, and that's Executive Director Reg Clausen of CASSA, said something really interesting. He said we all have the same problems in education, but we experience them at different times. So Anna's talking about like a funding deficit. Might not be the case in Quebec, in Alberta or BC right now, but then the cycle comes and then they experience those things. So that sharing is huge for CASSA. Anna, what are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I'm looking forward to expanding my own professional learning networks, but also hoping that others will have the same opportunities, similar opportunities for mentorship or for meeting up with, partnering with other provinces and having conversations where we can discuss student success and equity and innovation and learning. And just, I think, as a member of the PL committee, the Professional Learning Committee at CASSA, I think that one of our goals and my hope is that we will strengthen system leadership and their capacity to infuse innovation in schools and build a leadership capacity that's, where we have strong system leaders across Canada. And again, like you mentioned before, we're in a situation right now where a lot of us are feeling, that national closeness. And this will give us the opportunity to really, ensure that national perspective and then bring our regional perspectives to be and help them to get integrated together and building this building priorities together and just having help shaping a very long-term impact of increased success, and maybe we can be the leading country in education. Who knows? And if we could support that I think would be that would be great. It would be wonderful to give them these opportunities. We always want to give them these opportunities to reflect on their challenges and help them to be stronger and better leaders.
Amen to that as well. Anna, Dean, thank you very much for your time. This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri. Until next time.